Our next step in the strategic planning process is segmentation and positioning. This is where you really want to understand your customers and their network behaviors in the digital era and your brand. What's the relationship between those customers and your brand? What does it mean to them? So there are a lot of different ways to segment customers that marketers have tried. Sometimes we've traditionally segmented customers on things like demographics because that was the way that we paid or bought for advertising, for example. But more and more it is really valuable for marketers to take advantage that we have more behavioral data around customers and really try to segment your customers more around their behaviors and their needs and how they actually interact with your business. So here are some valuable segmentation dimensions, if you will, different ways you can slice your same population of customers, which I find are very useful for businesses in many different categories. If you have customer lifetime value data, that is a terrific way to segment customers. So can you figure out, do you have a certain tier of customers that are your highest profitability, and then maybe a middle profitability, and then maybe a lower per customer profitability? That can be very useful in putting together a strategy. You may also want to segment your customers on product type. You may have some customers who buy one type of your products and others who are very likely to buy another, and they don't overlap. So that might be a clear differentiator. Or their product use. You may have the same customers buying your same product, but for very different reasons. Their motivations are different. The way they use it, either business consumers or personal consumers, could be using it in different ways. You might, in some cases, segment your customers based on how they get to you, their path to purchase. You have got some customers who are coming in through a website and other customers who are coming in through your store. If you find those are actually different types of people, that might be another dimension for segmenting. In addition to thinking about the actual sort of customers as in the ones who buy and use the product, you may also want to look at some other important segments as you segment your customer population overall. So depending on your category, you might have purchasers versus requesters. You often see this in a B2B category where there's the department or the executive who is asking to buy something, but there's actually another intermediary, maybe a purchasing team or a IT team or something that signs off and on that business investment decision. So you'd want to look at both sides of that. Sometimes you may have an end user who's buying and using your product versus a channel buyer who you need to maintain a relationship and convince them to both carry and appropriately display and so forth your products to them. Those would be different segments. You may also find if your strategy is moving you into very different markets that you really want to differentiate between your current customers who you're going to market to a certain way because you know who they are versus your new targets. If the customers you're trying to target and move into now look quite different, behave quite differently than your established sort of customer base, then that might be a segmentation basis. Lastly, you might want to think about even beyond the realm of the customers and that decision process itself and think about influencers. Are there key people in the industry who are relevant and really shape perceptions around your category, your business, your brand? That might be a segment to focus on. And employees, depending on your objective that you've set for yourself. In some cases, your employees are really a key constituency who you want to activate and engage. So as you can see, there are many different ways to segment who you're focusing on in a marketing campaign or initiative. And the goal is, what I find is useful to take your customers and try some of these different ways of segmenting, see different ways you might slice them up, and then step back and say, well, for this goal, for this objective, which segments are most important to me? Which ones am I going to focus on? Which are the highest priority and most relevant to my needs and to this business goal I've set for myself? Once you've got the segments who you've decided that you're going to focus on for this marketing initiative, next you want to define each of them. You want to get more of a sense of who are these different customer segments. So of course, now you are going to want to think about demographics that may vary between them. You also want to look at psychographics. So again, not just where they live and age and gender and net worth and so forth, but also, what are their interests? What are their passions? What are their motivations? And that may vary between your different segments. Another important thing is to think actually about their technology use. You may find that you've got different customer segments who you're trying to reach who have different technology habits. Some of them are more savvy or just more likely to use maybe one social network versus another. Some of them are very reachable on mobile devices, others are not. It's very important to take these into consideration as you're developing a marketing strategy that's trying to engage customers with digital tools and digital behaviors, because you may find that different segments you're reaching actually have different behaviors. So you want to look at the kind of data that may be available about them. And so this was a study of actually American teenagers done recently, and it looked at a variety of different popular digital platforms, from social networks to streaming music services, video services, and it looked both what percentage of teenagers were using them on one axis, but also on the other axis, what percentage were using them daily. So two very interesting different factors. This is the kind of data which can now really give you insight into terms of, well, for a given customer segment, what are the places that you might best engage with them in terms of creating a digital experience that's going to be relevant in the course of their day-to-day lives.